Yes.
Oh, like,
Yeah.
wow, yeah.
It's only about that thick.
Meeting's just
Oh my goodness.
Like the willow trees.
Yeah, right, yeah. Back when the trees were that big, right? Talk about old growth, that's amazing. Well, yeah, it seems like every community has something to brag about and to show off and demonstrate to be proud of. So it's interesting to see whatever the character of everybody else's city towns as they're developing it. They're trying to do it in an authentic way to them, right? Much like you guys are.
One of their urban renewal, they have two on Peak Bay. 3 acres. A lot of acreage for.
Yeah, that's a big endeavor.
Waterfront.
That's very cool.
Just waiting for 6 o'clock and I'm sure you've worked out your presentation. It's just gonna go smoothly. The questions are gonna be just perfect.
Oh, there's a presentation. I'm excited to see it. Yeah, Shannon's done a great job pulling it together.
I'll pick it up.
Okay, yep. Okay, we'll call this special session to order. The discussion topic is Riverwalk Project Design Alternatives Presentation from Mayor Reed, and I'll kick it over to our City Administrator, John Walsh.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So, yeah, we're looking at design alternatives tonight. The purpose of today's meeting is to review the technical advisory group's work. There's been several meetings. We'll go over the schedule and review how much work has gone. Each councilor has been a part of those technical advisory meetings. Work. Really, what we're looking for here is to seek council's confirmation on the preferred design alternative, and that puts us on a path towards moving to the next steps and the design, more detailed drawings, just getting closer to keeping on schedule, and getting to that point where construction drawings and going out to bid. So we have Jeremy Shane and Shannon Sims from Mayor Reed, our architects working on the project. Jenny Dimshow and I have been managing the Riverwalk project on the city side.
Great, thanks, John. Good evening. Good evening. It is evening, Council, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all in person. We share your excitement and enthusiasm for the project. I know this is a milestone to kind of get to a realization of a preferred alternative, and we're excited to share that this evening with you. We have enjoyed the process, and I think we've purposefully set up a process to engage each and every one of you in the TAC, and hopefully you've gotten some good opportunity to voice feedback, and I think it's well represented in here. We've also had members of our TAC, Dan Carey, Jennifer and John, of course, Sue Nelson, and Mohammed Zahir were part and parcel to the decision-making and the review of the work to date, and we couldn't have done it without it and gotten to this point, so we really appreciate that. I do want to say that we also couldn't have done it without our design team. So Mayor Reed, we're the prime. We're landscape architects and urban designers that you hired, but you also met our team during the interview. We have OTAC on board, who was our civil and hydrology consultant, Pacific Habitat Resources for the environmental and habitat component of it. NV5 we have for geotech, which is really important in here, in environmental investigation. And then PAE for electrical, and of course, we couldn't do it without a great cost estimator, so ACC is part of our team as well. And much like you said, we'll continue this work. This is the alternative that will set the stage for design. And we'll kind of looking forward to getting design wrapped up in the spring, summer of next year, so we can begin first phases of construction on phase 1. But we're here tonight to look at the whole entire Riverwalk and the first phase 1 concept development and get some feedback from you and look forward to next steps. So Shannon.
Thanks, everybody. I'll just walk us through a little bit of the process that the Technical Advisory Committee has been through. I know each of you council members have sat in on part of that process, but not all of you have seen the whole thing, so we just want to give you a debrief on some of the decision milestones that the TAC went through on all those processes, as well as talking a little bit about some of the other work that was done. Many of you here attended the public forum that we had back in May and also participated in a very successful online survey that we got a lot of responses to. There's also been an interpretive focus group that's been, a special group of people that have been meeting to talk about interpretive and wayfinding on the project and identifying some themes for that. So I'll just briefly talk through some of that process and then we'll dig into what the preferred recommendation is for the Riverwalk. So sorry this text is a little small on the screen, but the first TAG meeting, we had Councilor Topaz attending and had a really great discussion about the opportunities and constraints on the riverfront and established these major project goals. So to provide public access to the waterfront for residents and visitors of all ages and abilities, to capture the unique energy and authenticity of St. Helens, to celebrate its long history, to protect and improve the local ecology and habitat, and to emphasize resiliency by reducing risk against climate change and using sustainable materials. So that was the sort of coming out of that first TAC meeting, that was what we walked away with as the guiding principles for the project. Then we, of course, heard from the community in the public forum on May 19th and also in 471 online survey responses. We got a whole lot of feedback about what people would like to see and make sure that we include in the future Riverwalk design. And these are some of the programs that really rose to the top as being highly popular and just we heard over and over repeatedly. So number one, it's a pathway. People really want to come out here and walk and bring their dogs and their kids and go running along the riverfront. They really care strongly about views, obviously. We can understand why. And a paddlecraft launch was also really highly ranked. People talk about kayaks and paddleboards and just having that kind of non-motorized boating access. And a desire to see that here. Some other programs that we really heard loud and clear, with a huge emphasis on wildlife, both viewing wildlife and also making habitat improvements that would facilitate them thriving here. The ability to get down to the shoreline and the water's edge was really important. And then different kinds of gathering space, picnicking, so places to socialize and lounge was also a really strong one that was emphasized. And then some others, outdoor dining, which may have a relationship to private development, and so we put a lot of thought into places where the Riverwalk might interface more closely with private development than other places. Playscapes, certainly a lot of mention of bringing small children here and really wanting that all ages kind of appeal. And then a lot of discussion about fishing, in particular the difference between fishing in the river versus in the channel and how that's possible along this waterfront. So those were some of the major guiding themes. And then we walked also with the Technical Advisory Committee through a very nitty-gritty discussion of permitting, which the mayor joined us for that conversation. And we talked at length about the different scenarios that the project could go through to permit the project. Anytime you do any work on the riverfront edge, there are different jurisdictions that get triggered depending on where you are on that riverbank, and that's because it's a very sensitive environment and it's very well protected. So we've talked through scenarios of locating the Riverwalk and its various features entirely upland of the ordinary high water line, out over it with a cantilever of some kind, or potentially going out into the water with a pier or something that goes below the ordinary high water. And just to summarize where we landed with the TAC on that issue was just they wanted to stay very open, understanding the increases in complexity for design, for permitting, and for construction of the various scenarios as you go kind of further into the water. They wanted to keep those options really open and just explore what is the design, what's the best design for this place. They didn't want to limit just simply based on the complexity of the permitting itself. But we had a really good discussion with our permitting experts on that topic, so everyone understood the issues very well. Next, I just want to mention some of the interpretive framework plan that's still ongoing, but in parallel with the TAC, there was an interpretive focus group that's been deciding the direction for the Riverwalk's interpretive and wayfinding system. And that group includes representatives from the Columbia County Museum Association, the Coos Bay Watershed Council, and the Columbia Soil and Water District, as well as Jenny and John from the city of St. Helens. And what you see on this slide is just some of the summary coming out of that group. The group decided they really wanted the primary audience for those materials to be people who live here, the St. Helens residents, with secondary audiences being, people who are coming from the region who might be more familiar with the general context of the Columbia, but not specifically familiar with this town. And then also, of course, keeping in mind there could be visitors coming from further away to this place. Generally, the goal would be to continue within the sort of system, the wayfinding system that has already been established by the city's wayfinding master plan, but also to build on it, to kind of continue to iterate on it as we incorporate features into the Riverwalk and look for really good opportunities for fusing the design together with interpretive elements. So at this point, we're really just have identified an overarching theme for the interpretive work. And that's stated at the top here, that the city of St. Helens is shaped by the connectivity, sustenance, and awe-inspiring beauty of the Columbia River. Then there are many sub-themes that fit within that, one being really a focus on the geological events that shape this landscape and this river, another being the thriving ecosystem that we've heard a lot about and a lot of interest from the community, and making sure that that gets communicated and there's a sort of an educational component. There's just a ton of interest, particularly we heard this at the public forum, in telling the story of the Native people who've been in this location for a long time, and so there's a strong sub-theme to explore on that topic. And then also the industry and the transportation present on the river was a theme. Certainly the history of the shipbuilding and the quarry and the mill that was on the site previously, as well as what you can observe in the shipping channel today. So all of that information we took together and formed 3 overall Riverwalk concepts that we presented to the TAC at the 3rd meeting. And I'll just kind of briefly touch on what each of those concepts was informed by. We had one concept, we titled it Bring the City to the River, which was really looking at opportunities to bring people out towards the water edge and even push out past the water edge. We have a series of overlooks in that scheme, and opportunities to kind of pull towards the river as much as possible and look at different opportunities that might afford in one whole Riverwalk scheme from north to south. The second scheme was, we titled that Bring the City Toward the River, and that was, Bring the River Towards the City. And that was really about pulling the river in, looking at regrading along the river bank, in making habitat improvements, riparian area improvements, and with maybe some discrete places where structures could pop out over the water. And then the third concept, Push and Pull, really looked at sort of a hybrid approach where it would create more of a curvilinear pathway, places where structures would push out, places where the river might assert itself back towards the bank a little bit more. And this afforded us the opportunity to really explore a whole bunch of different features, different elements that we heard interest from the TAC in exploring, and interest from the community and from all of you, and test those out, see where they fit, where they might not fit. And we had a really rich discussion. Sorry, some of the text here got a little scrambled, but we had a really rich discussion which led us not really to pick any one of those 3 options, but to hybridize a preferred scheme based on the feedback that we heard from the TAC on all of those options. So as was mentioned before, we will use this preferred design as a basis moving forward. The whole Riverwalk is shown here. The phase 1 area is the area in the very north from around Cowlitz Street up through the Columbia View Park. And what we call the phase 2 area is south of that point all the way down to the slough and to where the connection to Plymouth Street would be. What's also shown on this plan is a draft in progress of the street extensions project, which I know you all saw several weeks ago. The First Street and the Strand Street extensions are being modified. This is generally the west alignment that council approved with some modifications, changes to parking and various things. And that we're working on that team as well and moving towards a 30% design on that project. I will just mention, I think I'll walk through this preferred scheme in more detail. We'll start on the south end and work our way towards the north. Obviously, because the phase 1 will be moving further deeper into design and all the way to construction as part of this contract. So we do have additional materials for that we'll end with. But I'll just start from the south end of the site. So located at the south end, this is an area that we've been referring to as a recreational hub, and this is one of really kind of three major destinations that we have called out in the whole Riverwalk. I'll call them kind of mega destinations because I think they each of the three have a couple of different components that make it a really attractive spot on the site. One of the things down on this end that we think would be really attractive is having access down to the slough and the possibility of a paddlecraft launch that would come out under the railroad trestle and allow people that opportunity of slower water and a quieter place to get in and out of boats, and also the opportunity to get out directly into the channel instead of the more open river further north. There's an opportunity here to look at how access is provided for that type of use, as well as an existing sheet pile wall, which gives us an opportunity to perhaps to attach a cantilevered overlook off that, similar to the image you see on the upper right there. And there are several other components that could work really well in this area. We've talked a little bit about the possibilities for adjacent private development to have some sort of complementary use for those types of activities to support that. We've looked at perhaps having a slightly wider setback from the top of bank on the south edge here than we do on the rest of the riverbank, just to provide more space for those types of uses to converge, that kind of interface with the private development, and also keeping in mind that the vision for this is eventually to continue south across the railroad trestle, and so we want to make sure we have enough space for that kind of intersection to happen. Also, you'll see sketched on the side here a note of future marina. We know that's an idea that came up in the framework plan, and we wanted to make sure we carried that along. May not be designed as part of the project, but certainly not to be precluded, and something to think about, what's the attitude on how exactly that could interface in the future if there was a partner to build that up. Moving north, the next kind of major node here, we've been calling the Nob Hill node, which would be the point at which a trail coming from the base of Nob Hill, where it comes down the bluff today, would connect across First Street and bring you out to the water's edge. And that is a place that we think makes sense for some sort of feature. We're calling it here as a small plaza with some seating, and really an opportunity to acknowledge that moment and that connection, because you would be able to walk really a transect from up in Nob Hill Nature Park down the bluff across the new development and out to the water's edge, and there's a really good educational and interpretive opportunity that could be incorporated in that location. Generally, in the sort of southern end of the site, the Riverwalk path would follow the top of the bank. There may be some areas where we regrade and allow for riparian improvements, and those might incorporate retaining walls in order to kind of keep the Riverwalk path as close to the river as possible while still incorporating those opportunities for wildlife and habitat improvements. We've heard a lot of concerns, I think, during the public meeting about pathway user conflicts, and so we think that there's space in this area in particular to look at having a main Riverwalk pathway and then perhaps some braided secondary pathways that help give people more options, could connect to a private development, could connect to other points of interest along this section. But I think in the discussions with the TAC, it felt like an area that wants to be a little more meandering and contemplative, and maybe have more than one route that a person could follow as they move along the Riverwalk. This next slide is the middle area of the site, which is another one of those sort of major destination spots that we think has a couple of features that could really be attractive to people. We're calling it the Rocky Beach. This is an area today that's already, the bank is a little bit gentler slope than what you see in the rest of the Riverwalk. I think today it's already a place where people kind of scramble down through the through the vegetation and get down to the water's edge. And so we were really interested in formalizing that and helping to make that happen in a better, more accessible way. So this is showing a pathway, an accessible pathway down to that edge, as well as a stair connection. And then we had a few options really that we talked about with the TAC, and what you see here is really a hybrid of all three, because there were components both playing around with some of that remnant concrete that's out there now that is a reference to the old history, could be made to be an intentional part of the design, and something kind of celebrated just so that doesn't get erased from the site and that story can be told. The incorporation of a small jetty, and that you see in the lower right, the idea of adding additional stonework there creates an opportunity for habitat also as a place for people to explore. And then the Riverwalk pathway would follow the top of the main pathway to an overlook that could look down on that whole scene, as well as providing secondary trails that connect back towards First Street. So someone who maybe just wants to come to this part of the Riverwalk would have easy kind of commuting access from First Street.
When I passed by on my boat, I swore I'd seen 6 of you out on that concrete. On that
We were there,
concrete.
yeah, you saw us.
Maybe.
Yes.
I bet some of you have been out on that thing too. So just to the north of this area is a section of the Riverwalk that we gave some special attention to because there's the idea that the adjacent property is a potential hotel location. And there was, of course, interest in, what is the dynamics between the Riverwalk and adjacent private development. And in this location, there was a lot of interest that we heard in, outdoor dining and the opportunity, really like the image you see on the right, for people who maybe patronizing a local business to sit and look out on the river and have those great views, but also for that public edge to continue in that location. And so this is a place where the overall Riverwalk setback may narrow, but the pathway itself could widen and have a more seamless relationship, or slightly buffered from that kind of private use, so that both can be there and can be enjoyed together. And then just to the north of that area is what we're calling the Tualatin node. So similar to the Nob Hill one, this is a point where there would be a strong connection back to the west across First Street, and then connecting to the stairway that exists today that goes up the bluff to Tualatin Street. And I forgot to mention this before, but as part of the Streets project, we've been looking at the possibility of having a loop trail on the west side of First Street along the bluff that would tie back to this point. So this would be a place where that sort of a total, maybe I can highlight it here, sort of a total loop could be made between the Riverwalk and the Bluff Trail as part of the Streets project. And this is the area that we're looking at right now on the slide. The opportunity to have a special moment right there at the Riverwalk where those paths converge, and where the connections from the different destinations can be made.
I just might add real quick that there would be a plaza at that space to recognize that node, so a widening and opening, and again, maybe some step seating that goes down to recognize that for a place of pause in the intersection.
So this is then sort of a typical Riverwalk section to the north of that point, but really between Tualatin and Cowlitz Street. We've talked a little bit with ATTAC about different scenarios for how this pathway could work, and it's directly adjacent to the special opportunity area, which is the zone that's been identified as being held in public ownership for all kinds of future uses. Events could happen there, ideas of future buildings, or other types of all kinds of space. So I think the goal here was to create a successful Riverwalk pathway that provides that public access on the edge, but also leave as much upland flexible use space as possible, just so that the various scenarios of what could occur in that space can be played out. So similar to the southern section, there would be places where it would be regraded and have more clearing and habitat planting, and other places where the existing slope would be maintained. And then this brings us up to the Riverwalk Phase 1 area, which we gave special attention to because it is going further along in the design process as part of this contract. And we had dedicated a whole TAC meeting to it, so I know Jessica and I think Patrick was at that meeting. And I just wanted, before we dive into the details of the site plan, wanted to show this context plan because I think the context around the site really informs a lot of the decision making about what the design was here. So for one thing, the existing Columbia View Park, of course, is part of the Phase 1, as well as a section to the south of there that extends to about where Cowlitz Street aligns with the Riverwalk. And that view corridor down Cowlitz Street, the idea of coming out of the neighborhood or coming into downtown and being able to look out that corridor was really important to everyone. And both the view from the street to the Riverwalk, and then also at that point on the riverbank is just where you can see past the tip of Sand Island, and so you get views of Mount St. Helens from there, and that's really where it starts to kind of open up visually across the river. So that felt, I think, to everyone like if there's going to be some sort of special feature, that's the place for it, because that's really where the visual character changes quite a bit. Another thing we talked quite a bit about is about what's labeled here the boom and the marina in the foreground of that whole Phase 1 area. Because unlike some points further south, there's actually quite a bit going on in the immediate vicinity of the river off the Phase 1 edge. And we wanted to make sure not to crowd any of the boating activities there to give that kind of view and the access from the park, but to not cramp the style of anyone who's using that space, and also not to make it feel awkward at all in terms of what the treatment is. So I just wanted to point those out before we jump into the components of what is in the site plan. So starting from the south, that is where an overlook and a wider section of the Riverwalk is planned. So this really kind of opens up into a gathering space where the Riverwalk would push out past the existing top of bank. There would be a leaning rail there that would align with Cowlitz, and certainly in the next phases of design, more thought to put into how does that connect back to Strand, or what happens in the space between the street and that Riverwalk area. Just to the north of that, we've looked at incorporating some step seating into the top of the bank, which gives opportunity for kind of more casual seating and more capacity for people to watch all the activities happening on the water. And then as you continue north into what today is Columbia View Park, past the splash pad that would still remain in the play area there, that's another area where the Riverwalk would push out past the existing top of bank, have an armored edge and a railing, would give more space for people to look at Christmas ships or fireworks or things to gather along that edge. And then it would connect back behind the stage to the existing connection into the courthouse extension. A couple more things about this plan. We were asked to look at the future stage for Columbia View Park. And we played around with a couple of different alternatives of where that stage could go and what the stage design itself would be. And the design you see here looks at pulling the stage back and a little bit to the northeast of the site, so that the back of the stage would be facing the back of the courthouse parking lot. And what that does is sort of opens the stage up in a way so that it's not only accessible to the seating that's there now, but also kind of opens up more of the lawn space for use during events, so that there's sort of a two-sided gathering space and seating area for the stage. And what you see on the, I wish I could use this. I'll use this. What you see here on that site plan is a small berm, a lawn berm that could be built into that side of the park, which would allow for people to spread out blankets and chairs and also enjoy views and concerts and things that happen in that area. And then along the back side of the berm that faces the Riverwalk, more of a hardened edge, a step seating and places for people to gather who want to just come down and look directly out at the river. And another element of the stage realignment is that it helps kind of open up the park a little bit more, but also gives it a functional back, which it does need for events. We struggled with some of the other schemes to provide the sort of needed storage and space for that without blocking views, and we thought that pulling the stage in this direction really helps keep those views open, which is so important, while providing some of that functional need. And then the last thing I'll point out on this site plan is just the second structure that you see that's labeled multi-purpose pavilion. That is a more simple structure. It would be similar in style to the stage design, but it would be adjacent to the play area that's there today. It could be used for picnicking or shade structure, everyday activities, but during events it would be a great place for a soundboard, potentially for ADA seating, some covered and kind of prospect seating during large events. So it's an opportunity to have a secondary structure that really helps during those kind of larger events and community gathering that you have in that space.
I might add just a couple things. I mean, we did hear think maybe from Dan and Carrie and some others, that the idea of experiencing a concert or in that space, much of it is about the place. And we want it to be deferential to being in the place along the river and the distant views. And like you said, it opens those views up without the stage being the forefront, but it also creates that sort of place in the front where people gather and dance as the sort of communal center of the space as well. So I think the stage would be open on 3 sides, so it would be multi-faced, and you could orient in the way that made sense. But that it would have a larger audience as it played out towards both sides, and also to that secondary, to the ADA seating, and also create more versatile sort of accessible areas for that seating to the that smaller building.
So just to give you a little bit more flavor of this phase 1 area, this is a section that's drawn through that lawn berm that shows kind of the slope on the backside for people who could face towards the stage, and then the side of it that faces more towards the river. The Riverwalk section there itself is pretty wide at around 20 feet, which would be wider than we would expect it to be further south. This is sort of a special community gathering place, so we want to make sure there's enough capacity for really everybody who wants to be in this park and at this waterfront edge. And then this is just to the south at the Cowlitz overlook area. So that's wider paved space for the pathway itself, and then the overlook would be, you can see how far, much further out past the existing top of bank that would provide.
I think it's kind of worth noting that we don't know where that wall is going to be or what that overlook looks like, but we imagine that there could be an extension over it. It could be transparent. You can get the sense of being over the space instead of just at an edge. So I think that experience is important to us to explore as we get into the next. You've got images of it, into further design, so that it's about experience and the value of that experience to get there. So.
Yeah, and another thing that we'll really be looking at more in the next phase is that kind of human railing experience. That's such a distinct part of any kind of riverfront experience, and we would, these are just some examples, but we would be working on finding kind of what's the right material and the feel for that in St. Helens. And then these are some images that convey that idea of step seating that can be built into the top of the bank in the area between the overlook and the main park. And then these are just some kind of inspiration ideas for that berm and the seating on the side of it. So that the sort of dual nature of that feature, how it can function both for watching the river and watching concerts on the stage. And it could be, we're not anticipating that that's very tall berm, but it could be sort of a sculptural form in itself. And then along, many of the edges here, we're thinking about ways of providing that experience of being out closer to the water. So looking at types of retaining walls, and of course the railings, like I mentioned, will be something we explore the details of in the next phase. And then this is that view that we're trying to keep open and make sure that, like Jeremy said, it's the main event when you come to any kind of thing going on in the park. It's really, people are there to look out over the water and enjoy that space. And so that's, with the stage shifting a little out of the way, we're hoping to keep that. And then here are some images from the stage concept. So what you'll notice here is that there's some simple curves built into the structure and a little bit of an organic inspiration in some of the supports. So the idea that this is playing off kind of the natural setting of St. Helens and maybe making some reference to that in terms of the forms and also potentially the materials that are used. And then, like I mentioned before, this version of the stage explores that idea of having a more solid back to it, which is an opportunity really that we only have because we've shifted it over towards the parking lot. We would otherwise try to make that as transparent as possible so you wouldn't walk in the views. And these are some images that go along with that stage concept idea, just some formal inspiration and material inspiration that we would continue to explore. So that is my walkthrough of the preferred Riverwalk concept coming from the TAC. And I wanted to pause and also give Jenny or John the opportunity to provide any more detail that I missed or comments as members of the TAC.
John? Anything? I feel like Shannon kind of hit all the major points that I was hoping she would touch on. I think it's really important to go out to the site and walk it, and I've been doing that kind of daily, trying to visualize this. And I think that helped kind of guide our conversations in those technical advisory committees and really nail down the location for the stage in particular was something we went back and forth on. And so, yeah, I'm just really interested in council's feedback, and I hope it's a discussion.
Yeah, one of the things that the council's talked about is the need for parking, accessible parking close to the trail. We have this Riverwalk project, we also have the Streets project going at the same time, and there's a lot of public parking proposed in the Streets project, but that doesn't, and there will be parking required for those development parcels on those projects, but parking lot for the park would also be one of those things that you may not see on the streets. Or parking on the other side of the right of way or something like that. So there's other parking opportunities for the downtown that aren't shown here.
Could I speak to that opportunity?
Yeah, now's the time.
That should
Yeah,
be.
could-
Now,
Sure. Could we go back to slide number 10? This might be a long-range kind of concept that deals with transportation and parking. Think about 20 years from now, think about 30 years from now, what the issue would be if this thing pops and is full of residents and shoppers and it becomes the hub of our city, which I think it will. So this is what I've thought all along, is how we're going to take care of all the transportation needs for people, ingress and egress. And so far, we only have two kinds of issues coming in down on First Street and on Plymouth Street. What if, like up at the Veterans Hospital, they make an elongated parking garage, or like Twilliger Plaza in Portland as well, where there's an elongated parking garage behind kind of a condo building? What if, are we on slide 10?
Yes.
You want the-
It says preferred over all
Oh,
river
there we
walk
go.
concept.
I got you.
I've got page 10 on mine for some reason. Okay. What would happen if we go here and we've got this area from up here on Tualatin Street, we have ingress and egress from a parking structure that would have an elevator of glass that could also serve for our tourism and for people coming into the city up and down. What if we had that in this area to begin with, and that would give us ingress and egress of pallets and into the parking garage and back out down 4th Street and out of here or into the city. And that would, the only thing that would happen, it would probably affect 4th Street just a bit, which is a route to get out of Halloween Town and to get out of 4th of July anyway. So, and what that does is it opens it up for a long-term framework plan, not now, because we don't want that parking, I don't think now, but later on, can we kind of plan for that? That's you guys did just such a phenomenal job of working through all the goals, okay? And then I started thinking about the transportation piece. And to me, I think this is one that could really pop. I think about Oregon City. They have that elevator that comes down, okay, and people utilize that. And that was an old elevator that was run by the Falls, a pneumatic kind of thing. That isn't the attraction. The attraction is being up there, looking over the falls, looking at the falls, looking over the city. That's just a concept I think we should consider in a framework. Okay, so that's it. It would affect the Bluff Trail a little bit, maybe shorten it a bit, but not that big a deal. Anyway, that's my 2 bits worth. I'll say no more.
I'm gonna follow up what he starts on parking. how many people are you gonna have around the gazebo? Hard numbers, a quick guess. Now,
It will grow from what it is today.
I agree, but are they 2 people, 1,000 people? And I'm gonna need a place for those people to park relatively close.
Right.
Now, going to the opposite end, you have your kayak landing with no way to unload kayaks, and you cannot, with a beginner, get under that trestle. Right now, you can walk under the trestle, the river's so low. So your kayaking has gotta be on the front side. But you need to unload equipment and hide that equipment. The other thing that I find was saying, and I'm gonna come back with a concept problem that I have with the whole thing. But the next thing I see, I walk up and down that, river walk, quite a bit. And as Jenny says, it's really neat. But if I'm sitting there having my, supper with some clients, and I've got somebody and his kid asking me to take the bowl out of my soup so he can keep going, that isn't what I call a gracious dining area if I got people in front of me. Right now, it's great because there's nobody there, it's a great walking room. If I've got to walk through somebody's dining room, it's a little bit iffy. The other thing I see in there is, if I gotta get fire engines from the front side being the riverside in there, I don't see how to do that. Now I'm looking at disaster, what kind of other problem? If I had a big wide berm through there that I could run my fire engines, I could use that for my larger pathway. It's not really a street, but I can get equipment, I'm gonna use it for 2 things. So, the other thing is, just count how many people possibly could be down there and see how many parking places you're gonna need. Because if you fill that up with, say 250 apartments, that's what, 500 cars? Put some businesses underneath there, you've got an owner and a helper for each business, pushing about 4 parking places for the customers. And of course, I've got visitors coming for the people in those apartments. So that parking is gonna sneak up on you. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to philosophy. All great cities in the world come together at a confluence of trade. And this piece of ground is absolutely no different. Even before Lewis and Clark, because the Lewis River, the Multnomah Channel, the Columbia River, the Indians, the Native Americans, this was the collecting point. When St. Helens got started, that was where our mills were. That's where we could move logs in and out and timber. The reason I say that the moneymaker of this area was that piece of ground there, the town was a leech or a parasite. The town did not become a financial engine after the mills left. So I've got to somehow generate a way to make money on this space. I've got to have people come to it. And it's nice that the local people can enjoy it, and they should. But we don't spend money. That's a philosophical thing. Putting the stage with the back to the north is a fantastic idea. One of the neat things about it is if you've got a couple of things going, the actors like to go off the back of the stage, not wind their way through the audience. And if you need equipment, because we're gonna have to yell at the county to use their parking lot. But the other thing that you should realize is the wind coming from the north, there's some funny wind eddies down here, and that may get annoying for some things. So as you plan things, that wind will become a problem, as well as large amounts of people with no parking.
Okay, so I really love this design, moving that stage, I agree with Councilor Topaz, is phenomenally good. I like the other little gazebo, the idea of maybe it could be for, I'm curious how big the berm is. Yeah, I heard you say it wasn't fairly tall.
Right, no, it wouldn't, you would still be able to see over it from the amphitheater. It would just
Okay.
be a few feet of rise across a pretty long
4
distance on
feet
the
at
park.
max.
So, and then the.
Let's be careful with
And then the parking issue, of course, is on, a lot of that's on the civil side of things. I just wanna let people know that this is Mayor Reed, they're here, landscape architects for our boardwalk. And that OTAC is our civil side, which is our other parking and road alignments and stuff like that. And, you know, I mean, there's even been the idea of throwing around, maybe Strand should be a one-way. It opens up that much more for parking and whatever else possibilities. So, but I think, looking at this, phase one, we work for you, the citizens of St. Helens. Look at phase two and phase three. And we can be pushed. You guys are the drivers of this, really. Yeah, I'm looking at that kayak launch down there at the end and the train trestle and potential docks down there. And this is, you know, me and Councilor Berkeley were talking prior to our work session, or after our work session, and this is bigger than any of us. Even if you're sitting here today, this thing is gonna leave a mark for a lot of years, so. I'm honored to be working with very qualified people here today. I love it. I absolutely love the whole thing. I love that you guys were on the concrete, actually taking it in. And look what you did to that area. You know, it's right in the middle of that little concrete stub you see right there. They're on that right there. And, so yeah, I love it. I just wish we had more money just to do it all right now. So,
A quick question, are you gonna have somebody survey the underwater and see what junk has been thrown off the edge with the mill?
Well, I think we're surveying the parts that we're able to work on. Within the budgetary constraints, we're doing what we can.
They say,
Yeah.
the mills have a bad habit.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
we can see the tips of them, right? Yeah.
I'm actually gonna give the other two counselors their option to speak, because we're running close on time in here and.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that at first, I was a little iffy, but I see you guys have changed some things, and I'm very happy with it. I really love the Rocky Beach. That area looks very inviting, and it's exciting to see. So thank you guys for that. I laid out with, or I was in the park yesterday with Jenny, just looking things over and like getting a vision for how the stage would be, and I'm very happy with this. So good job.
I shared prior to the meeting with our consultants and with Mayor. I was almost brought to tears twice by this concept. The first was during the week when I was at home looking at the initial project. When I say brought to tears, brought to tears of joy. That just the just how everything's being incorporated. And the second time was after the work session, talking with Mayor Scholl and others about this. I think I've heard kind of two extremes. Some residents who have been envisioning this property as just one huge park, and others envisioning it as needing to be an economic driver with businesses and I think that this concept I like because I think it does it maximizes access to the waterfront and river for our citizens. It's not narrow and confined, you know, maybe a 10 or 15-foot narrow path that will then be with the rest of the property then being filled with buildings. And so I like it very much. In terms of what it looks like there, we still have a lot of decisions to make ultimately about parking, business. There's going to be a need for private investment in order to make this a go. But I think if we can use this as the cornerstone and drive that we have, I think we have a winner here in the overall concept.
When we vetted these, Mayor Reed as our landscape architect and OTAC, their projects are really well thought out, and the follow-through was important to us. And these two, OTAC and Mayor Reed, follow through with what they set out to design. Of course, money's always the issue for everything, but, yes. So it made a big difference to us too, as well.
Have you ever seen or looked at the waterfront in Owensboro, Kentucky?
I've not been there, sir.
Well, because they've got a big park to bring people downtown with a lot of interest in young people coming down. They do have an economic engine of loading grain and some other stuff downstream, basically just out of your pictures compared to way far away. But they've had a very large entertainment area, parks, things like that. Again, having to deal with the Ohio River, so you've got the similar problems in that waterfront.
Are you guys seeking direction today?
Sorry, I don't know, I was looking.
I could tell Jenny was really wanting to.
Oh no, I do wanna remark on the number of people in the audience and that this presentation was probably difficult to read. And so it is uploaded online. I'd be happy to print copies of these designs if you wanna take home physical and digest it. I would like to say too, there's another touch point for the public to engage in this project. We have another public meeting planned further in the design. And it will be intended for your eyes and input and audience. This was sort of a council-focused presentation, and so I apologize if you felt like you were not engaged in that. There will be opportunities for more engagement in the future. Just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I just love that you guys thought of the corridor points, like coming down the quality stairs there, and that the OTAC has even taken that into consideration too, which is one of the points you pointed out. OTAC even looked at all this kind of all over place for maybe even handicap to offload or just to stop for a second to take a quick look. No parking, but just a loading and unloading point. And yeah. And the extension of the park, I just want to make this evidently clear to people that right here is our current park, okay? And right here is the last building. Right here is the last building that you see on the Strand. You know, look at how much further that park is. This is not a building right here, that's development. And all, the whole waterfront is all park. It is all park, it's public, it's our walkway. Just like we said we were going to do. Totaling probably 6, maybe more acreage. I don't know. You might have an idea, but it's quite a bit of property that we.
I think it's a little less than 6 acres, actually, I did the math.
And so with our business community here that we have in our hometown district right now, we need some people living there in order to make this thrive. It's the economics and it's called ROI, return on investment, and we're all in. We are. This is huge. This is really, really big time. So, thank you.
Thanks for that feedback, that was clear, and I'll say maybe as a conclusion that we're really excited to move forward. I mean, this is a huge step forward, I think, and also a long way to go, obviously, with all the detailing and design and diving in deeper. So I look forward to getting started and moving forward.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn so we can get you a chance to, we're gonna start maybe 7:01-ish, give a Mayor Rita, and it's M-A-E-R, not Mayor, it's Mayor Reed, okay? Just so you know.
Great work.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We can leave these up here for reference if you want,
Yeah, maybe
Want to see them?
and put them in we can pull them
with the audience, yeah, I feel like we all came to look at them. There's a break, they can come up and look.
up.
And if I could remind some
Yeah, I
people, if
think
you haven't had a chance to sign in, please sign in back there.
We're blocking your view.
It's a nice recess if anyone wants to come up and look.
Yeah.
Ritza, yeah, I can
Everything
I
on
can go to Ritza right now.